friends, it's Christy from IShouldBeMoppingTheFloor.com. Today I'm going to show you a great trick for hand chalking that makes it a lot easier than it really looks. I'm going to show you one board that I worked on for Valentine's that was super simple, so you can kind of get the idea behind it. You ready? Let's get started. You're going to start with a clean chalkboard, and you're going to go ahead and measure the dimensions of your chalkboard. You'll be using this to create your design according to these dimensions. This is one of my favorite chalkboards in my home. As you can see, it's 32 inches by 37 inches, and those are the dimensions I'm going to need to create my design. You can use any imaging software, Illustrator, Photoshop Elements, regular Photoshop, CS3, CS4, whatever you have to create this, or even PicMonkey. But today I'm going to be showing you how I used Photoshop Elements to create this particular design. As you can see, I start with my dimensions of the board that I measured. So I created an image that was 32 inches by 37 inches, which of course is huge, but I will scale it back. I just wanted to start with those so I didn't have to do a lot of math on my own and let the program do my math for me. After creating your image, you'll go ahead and immediately change it to a smaller dimension. You'll make sure that you have, in Elements, you'll go to Image Size. Make sure you have Constrained Proportions checked, and then go ahead and resize it so it will fit on a letter size paper for easier printing for you later. Basically, you want to make sure it will fit within 8.5 by 11 inches. So size whichever height or width accordingly so the whole image can be dragged later to a letter size document. At this point, you'd go ahead and create your actual design. Here I'm working with my Be Mine Valentine design, and I will have it as a free printable available tomorrow to download and just frame if you'd rather not chalk it. I'm going to be showing you how I do this. I use a grid system. I learned this in college. I was an art major for quite a while and dropped that later to just switch to graphic design. But in my art classes, I learned a grid method where you compose columns and rows covering an area, and it creates a framework, and it's a little bit easier to organize your design to transfer the design, your image to a new design on a blank slate. It's broken down into smaller zones, so it makes it a lot easier to remain visually consistent and easier for you to copy. I've said it before and I'll say it again, I'm definitely not a math person. I'm sure there is an easier algebraic equation to do this, but I basically, when I grid something, I just half it and half it and half it to create a very easy grid for myself rather than having to go through and do math. And that probably seems very silly. That's just kind of the way I operate and the way I'm wired, so it is what it is. But I basically go ahead and half my design in both the vertical and the horizontal, and then I create a square in my program that will lay on top as another layer, and then from that square I can grab its half points and just basically lay lines on the entire design. There is an actual grid built into Photoshop Elements, and I've never used PicMonkey, but I'm sure those type of programs all have a grid. However, this grid cannot print, so you are going to have to lay an actual grid that you draw on top of your design in order to get it to print out. At this point, you'll drag this design onto an 8.5 by 11 so you can print it easily. You can do this with any design you find online. If you'd like to drag a free printable from my place to be gridded into some sort of imaging software, feel free. This is kind of how I do it. I do a side-by-side and literally just drag it over. Then print, and then you're ready to go. Now, if you want, you can skip all of that, print a design, and then fold it half, 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 to go ahead and do the next part. The next part, we're going to move to our actual chalkboard with your printed design, and we'll go ahead and show you how we chalk it onto the actual board. Once you're at your actual chalkboard, you're going to do the same thing. Just start halving and halving and halving. Use a ruler, yardstick, piece of chalk to go ahead and draw an actual grid on your board. I just half it and half it and half it, and make sure I have as many grid zones, squares, or rectangles as there are in my printed version, so I can keep the whole thing consistent. Once you're completely gridded, you'll go ahead and start drawing your actual letters. I start in the middle of my board. I just feel like it's easier for me to anchor everything that way. I do outlines first, and if there is a design within the letter, I do it last so it can stay consistent in the entire word like I have here on mine. I also use a wet paper towel as I'm going. As you can tell, I kind of erased the grid marks from the inside of mine as I was drawing them. As you can see, what we're doing here is keeping each chalked word in the same grid zone as it is on the paper. That's the idea behind the whole thing. I'm going to move on to the B next, just because it's the only other word in this design, but each design is different and kind of speaks to me and tells me which direction to head as far as which order I chalk everything in. Since the B is cursive, I start out with thinner and then I fill in and make it thicker as I go. I kind of like to reference the zone to see what the thickness should be like in terms of where it is on the paper versus where it is on the chalkboard, and that's how I try to keep it consistent with the actual font. And with objects like your laurel leaf here, you're just going to basically transfer it grid square from paper to the grid square on the chalkboard to keep the spacing consistent. And there's your finished design. Now what you're going to go and do is erase the lines with your wet paper towel. You'll just go in gently and take off those grid lines. As you can see, then it does leave an erased version of your grid, which obviously you don't want that either. Even a ghost image grid is still a grid that shows kind of your secret. So I go through and I take my paper towel and just kind of rub it all over to make sure that that grid does not keep showing through on the final design. There you have it, the final version of the Be Mine design in chalk. This works with any image, transferring it to a chalkboard using this grid method. Thanks for joining me today. I'm Christy from IShouldBeMoppingTheFloor.com.